From the moment Isabella stepped out of the cab, her heart thundered in her chest. She was about to beg for a place in a world she had once ruled as its queen, a world now dominated by a lavish mansion belonging to the man who had once sworn undying love. Shadows of betrayal, heartbreak, and shattered vows lurked behind every polished marble pillar. In the hushed corridors, tragedy seemed to whisper her name. Tonight, she would humble herself before Richard Harrington, the millionaire husband who had ruthlessly cast her aside. She clung to the desperate hope that he would see the woman he once adored. Instead, in a moment of cold finality, he slammed the door, unknowingly shattering the carefully constructed life he thought he controlled. But fate, forever changed by that single act, was about to intervene. Isabella Romano was born on a crisp spring morning in the small Italian town of Lucca, raised by parents who prized tradition and family above all else. Her father, Francesco Romano, was a respected chef who owned a modest trattoria on the outskirts of town. Her mother, Caterina, took care of the home and supervised Isabella's studies, instilling in her a deep sense of loyalty and determination. Life in Lucca was simple, idyllic. Every morning, the smell of freshly baked bread wafted through the narrow streets, mixing with the laughter of neighbors greeting one another in melodic Italian. Despite the warmth of her childhood, Isabella yearned for a life beyond the boundaries of her sleepy town. Even as a teenager, she dreamt of traveling to big cities Paris, New York, London, and making a name for herself. Her father, while encouraging, wisely warned her about the dangers lurking in unfamiliar worlds. Remember, he would often say, never lose your soul chasing what glitters on the outside. But Isabella, with eyes full of hope, believed she could conquer any challenge. By the time she turned 18, Isabella had earned a scholarship to study international business at a renowned university in London. Thrilled to embark on this new journey, she promised her parents she would return home richer in knowledge and experience. She stepped onto the plane, brimming with excitement. Little did she know her life was about to intertwine with that of a man whose wealth and influence stretched far beyond her modest imagination, Richard Harrington. Richard came from a vastly different world. His parents, George and Clarissa Harrington, were an influential couple from the upper echelons of British society. They owned a string of luxury hotels across Europe, including the Harrington on Park Lane in London, known for its gleaming marble floors and crystal chandeliers. From a young age, Richard was groomed to inherit the family empire: private tutors, fencing lessons, summers in Cannes, and winters in St. Moritz. Yet beneath the polished exterior of a trust fund heir was a restless soul. He yearned to make his own mark in business, to build a fortune that didn't merely hinge on his family's legacy. They first met at a university networking event hosted by the business department. Isabella, nervously holding a cup of punch, saw Richard from across the hall. He wore a tailored navy suit, his sandy brown hair perfectly coiffed, and exuded a confident air that naturally drew people in. But what truly captured Isabella's attention was the flicker of genuine curiosity in his eyes. He seemed interested in the world around him, not just the grandeur associated with his name. When they finally bumped into each other near a table of hors d'oeuvres, something electric passed between them. A single conversation stretched into an hour, then two, until both realized they had found a connection stronger than any first impression should be allowed to have. Richard Harrington had seen many beautiful women in his life, but there was something about Isabella that set her apart. She was neither dazzled by his wealth nor intimidated by his name. Her ambition matched his, and her warmth filled the air whenever she spoke. Their first date was a modest picnic in Hyde Park. Richard brought champagne. Isabella brought homemade sandwiches, reminding him of her father's trattoria back in Lucca. With each passing moment, they peeled back layers of each other's lives. Isabella, the wide-eyed dreamer from a small Italian town, and Richard, the legacy-burdened heir determined to create his own empire. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Richard invited her to elegant dinners hosted by his parents, introducing her not only as his girlfriend, but also as a future partner in his business endeavors. Isabella found herself seated next to bankers, politicians, and celebrities, learning the art of conversation under the sharp, appraising eye of Clarissa Harrington. All the while, Richard proved that beneath the luxurious veneer, he craved the simple authenticity Isabella offered. One evening, after a gala, they slipped away from the crowd and danced by the Thames under the moonlight. No cameras, no paparazzi, just two people in love, their footsteps echoing over the quiet embankment. But social gaps are not bridged overnight. Clarissa Harrington was famously strict with those who entered her son's life. She was cordial to Isabella in public, but her disapproval showed in cold glances and pointed remarks about family standards. Isabella felt the weight of the Harrington name in every micro-interaction. The heartbreak came one Sunday afternoon when she overheard Clarissa whisper to Richard, "She's lovely, darling, but is she really Harrington material?" Those words sent a chill through Isabella, casting long shadows of doubt. Still, Richard stood firmly by her side. His father, George Harrington, proved more diplomatic, urging them to focus on building a future together, if that was truly their dream. Eventually, the budding couple graduated from university. Richard was set to take on a leadership position in the Harrington hotel business, but he also had an idea for a new venture, a chain of luxury eco-resorts across Europe and Asia, championing sustainable tourism. He hoped to run it as a separate entity under the Harrington umbrella, a statement of his independence. Isabella, with her international business degree, was determined to help him shape this project. Soon enough, they found themselves working side by side, forging plans late into the night at Richard's penthouse apartment near Knightsbridge. The synergy in their business mirrored the passion in their personal life. After 2 years of dating, Richard proposed to Isabella on the rooftop of the Harrington Hotel, the London skyline shimmering behind them. The ring, an heirloom from his grandmother, sparkled on her finger. She tearfully accepted, and for a while, everything felt like a fairy tale. The wedding was a grand spectacle held in Tuscany, close to Isabella's hometown, fulfilling her lifelong dream to celebrate among her childhood friends and relatives. George Harrington spared no expense, and Clarissa begrudgingly oversaw the arrangements to ensure they met Harrington standards. Rows of white chairs lined a vineyard near the town of Lucca, where the sun kissed the rolling hills. Roses, lilies, and hydrangeas decorated the venue in soft pastel colors. Guests flew in from all corners of the globe: London, Paris, New York. Among them were well-known names in the business world, such as the elusive real estate tycoon Michael Anderson and diamond heiress Julia Thompson. Isabella's parents wept tears of joy as she walked down the aisle in a handmade Italian lace gown, her face aglow with love. Richard, clad in a bespoke suit, stood at the altar, his eyes only for her. The breeze carried the sweet scent of olives and grapes, underscoring the romance of the moment. They exchanged vows that promised loyalty, respect, and unwavering support, vows that would echo, sometimes painfully, through their marriage for years to come. In that moment, as the priest pronounced them husband and wife, neither imagined the heartbreak lying in wait. The reception was a swirl of laughter and fine dining, an 8-course meal featuring truffle pasta, fresh seafood, and the best vintage wines from local vineyards. There were speeches and toasts, each more moving than the last. Isabella's father, Francesco, wished the couple unending happiness and reminded them of the simplicity of true love. Clarissa Harrington delivered a perfectly polite speech, though astute observers noted the underlying tension in her carefully chosen words. Richard and Isabella danced under the stars, convinced that their union was unshakable. If only the radiance of that day could have shielded them from the trials soon to come. Returning to London, they found themselves thrust into the fast-paced demands of expanding Harrington Resorts. Isabella took the helm as Director of International Development, and Richard championed the Eco-Resorts project. Early on, their synergy translated into significant victories: partnerships with environmentally conscious investors, a footprint in Asia's exotic locations, and glowing press coverage. They became a golden couple in the hospitality industry, attractive, innovative, unstoppable. But success doesn't come without sacrifice. Work hours stretched far beyond the typical 9 to 5. Richard jetted between continents to attend meetings, while Isabella coordinated teams from the London headquarters. Late dinners morphed into missed dinners altogether. Their once intimate evenings of discussing dreams over homemade pasta turned into quick text messages that read like corporate updates. The tension, subtle at first, grew thick enough to cause arguments over small things. The color of a new hotel suite's drapes, the direction of a marketing campaign, even which brand of champagne should be stocked at their properties. Amid these professional triumphs and personal strains, Clarissa Harrington took it upon herself to continually remind Isabella of the responsibilities that came with the Harrington name. Sometimes it was a sideways comment about her wardrobe at press events. A Harrington should choose an understated brand, not something so provincial. Other times, it was a veiled critique of Isabella's management style. Richard tried to shield Isabella from these remarks, but Clarissa knew how to strike at her daughter-in-law's insecurities. This slow trickle of disapproval ate away at Isabella's confidence, making her question whether she truly belonged in the Harrington world. Despite the undercurrents, their business soared together. They launched 5 eco-resorts within 2 years in Bali, Santorini, the Maldives, Phuket, and the Seychelles. Each property boasted solar energy, sustainable materials, and community-focused development programs. The media heralded them as pioneers of mindful luxury. Investors praised their leadership, culminating in Harrington Resorts earning record-breaking profits. On the surface, Richard and Isabella seemed unstoppable. Yet behind the scenes, their relationship teetered on a precipice. When everything around them sparkled with success, a hidden darkness emerged. An ambitious junior executive named Stella Carter joined Harrington Resorts, bringing with her impeccable credentials, an MBA from Harvard, experience at a rival luxury brand, and an uncanny ability to read people. Stella reported directly to Richard, quickly becoming his most trusted advisor. While Isabella initially welcomed Stella's contributions, she grew uncomfortable with how Stella ingratiated herself into every aspect of Richard's professional life. Meetings that once included Isabella were now labeled senior executive briefings, to which Stella held the key invite. Rumors began to swirl within the company corridors. "Stella Carter is gunning for the top," whispered one manager. "She's using Harrington to climb," said another. Isabella tried to dismiss the gossip. She trusted Richard implicitly. He wasn't the type to be swayed by a cunning newcomer. Yet the distance she felt growing between them was more than mere business demands. She sensed an emotional shift, an unspoken tension in his voice whenever she questioned Stella's role or decisions. At home, Richard seemed guarded, often deflecting questions about work. Late-night calls with Stella became frequent. He insisted it was purely professional. "We have a major project launching in Morocco, darling. You know how hectic these things get." And yes, Harrington Resorts was indeed venturing into North Africa, but it was the secrecy that gnawed at Isabella. Why didn't she know more? Why was her role in these expansions suddenly minimized? The breaking point arrived when a photo of Richard and Stella appeared in a society column, snapped at an exclusive gala in Marrakesh. Isabella was in London, finalizing paperwork for a new spa concept. She had no idea Richard had even attended that event. When she confronted him about it, he shrugged. It was a last-minute decision, he insisted. We were meeting potential investors, and Stella was the contact. The explanation left a bitter taste in Isabella's mouth. She yearned for the days when they were a team, excitedly discussing every step of their journey. Now, she felt relegated to the sidelines of her own life. Months passed, and with them came more success for Harrington Resorts. Numbers soared, expansions continued, and the press hailed Richard Harrington as a visionary in the hospitality world. Isabella found herself managing peripheral tasks, increasingly overshadowed by Stella's relentless ambition. Tensions at home escalated. Late-night arguments replaced affectionate conversations. Where there was once mutual adoration, now suspicion and resentment festered. Clarissa, ever the meddling mother-in-law, fueled the discord. She subtly championed Stella, praising her modern perspective and polished manner. During a Harrington family dinner, Clarissa turned to Isabella. "Darling, you must be so relieved Stella is stepping up, helping Richard shoulder such a big empire. You should focus on other aspects of life, like starting a family, perhaps." Isabella felt her cheeks flame with humiliation. The insinuation was clear. She was deemed inadequate in the business realm, relegated to a decorative role at best. Richard, torn between loyalty to his wife and the unstoppable force that was Stella, chose to numb himself and work. He refused to confront the mounting problems. "Can we not argue about this tonight?" he would plead, exhaustion etched on his features. But the more he avoided confrontation, the more Isabella felt isolated, her trust unraveling thread by thread. One evening, the final straw arrived in the form of a board meeting. Isabella discovered she had been quietly sidelined from a massive project in Dubai. The official reason was lack of direct involvement in that region. Furious, she stormed into Richard's office, only to find him in a heated discussion with Stella about rebranding strategies. As soon as she entered, they fell silent. The tension was palpable. The old Isabella might have calmly addressed the issue, but months of pent-up frustration exploded. She accused them both of cutting her out of the very empire she had helped build. Stella responded with an elegant shrug and a condescending smirk that Isabella would never forget. The marriage had been eroding for months, but the day the papers were served still came as a shock. Richard filed for separation, claiming irreconcilable differences and citing that Isabella was hindering the business. He insisted she refused to adapt to the company's evolving needs. Devastated, Isabella locked herself in their Knightsbridge penthouse for days, ignoring calls and the barrage of paparazzi waiting outside. Even her own parents in Lucca could offer little comfort from afar. Richard moved out temporarily, staying at Clarissa's Mayfair home. Publicly, he maintained a stoic silence, releasing only a brief statement from Harrington Resorts that the couple seeks a private resolution. Behind closed doors, he battled guilt and regret. Still, pressure from Clarissa, along with the manipulations of Stella, hardened his resolve. The business had never been more successful, and Stella assured him that Isabella's departure would be best for all parties. Heartbroken, Isabella felt the ground beneath her crumble. She had dedicated her career, her vision, and her heart to this company and this marriage. Overnight, she lost her status, her sense of belonging. Lawyers got involved, dividing assets and drafting settlement options. Isabella refused to sign any final agreement, desperately hoping for reconciliation. She believed this was all a misunderstanding, that the tension from their rapid business growth and Clarissa's constant meddling had poisoned their union. She clung to the hope that the man she married, the one who danced with her by the Thames, would come back to her. A month after the separation, rumors spread that Richard was staying at a new lavish property in the countryside, a mansion in Surrey known as Roseworth Manor. It was a Harrington family retreat, guarded by tall iron gates and a maze of hedgerows. Desperate for a chance to speak to him without lawyers, paparazzi, or board members interfering, Isabella mustered the courage to go there unannounced. On a chilly autumn evening, she arrived in a cab, her heart racing. She could feel the weight of every decision and every argument. She hoped the history they shared would be stronger than the rumors swirling about Stella or the pressure from Clarissa. But as she walked up the winding driveway, her once confident stride felt unsteady. When she reached the grand door, Isabella lifted the ornate knocker, her hand trembling. She had prepared a speech, a heartfelt plea for one more chance for an honest conversation. The door opened, revealing Richard, his expression a mixture of shock and guarded resolve. Behind him, in the corridor, she caught a glimpse of Stella's silhouette. The sight stabbed her like a dagger. She tried to speak, her voice trembling. "Richard, please, I just need to talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." He said nothing at first, glancing over his shoulder as though seeking approval from someone else, perhaps Stella. Silence strangled the air. Then, In a move that would forever haunt him, Richard stepped back and let the heavy door slam in Isabella's face. The echo reverberated through the manor, sealing her fate on that doorstep. The blow of that door hitting the frame cut through Isabella's final hope. She stood there for a moment, tears carving silent trails down her cheeks. The world seemed to tilt. This was the man she had given her life to, who had vowed to love her forever, now shutting her out like an unwelcome stranger. Slowly, she turned and walked away from the mansion. Each step felt heavier than the last, her mind spinning with grief and disbelief. Before reaching the cab, she pulled out her phone. In that fragile moment, she called her mother. "Mama," she whispered, voice thick with tears. He shut the door. He wouldn't even speak to me. Katerina's sobs on the other end offered limited solace. Isabella sank into the cab seat, feeling unmoored, utterly alone. The next day, a high-profile gossip column ran a story. Isabella Harrington begs for entry, denied by a strange husband at Roseworth Manor. The story sparked relentless speculation about the marriage. Public opinion swung from pity to scorn. Some labeled Isabella a gold digger, clinging to the Harrington fortune. Others condemned Richard for his coldness, especially when she had helped build the successful eco-resort empire. The swirl of rumors only deepened the gulf between them. In the days that followed, Isabella made a decision that would forever change her life. She left London. Unable to bear the heartbreak and the public scrutiny, she quietly flew back to Lucca. Her parents welcomed her with open arms, but she soon realized that her old bedroom and the comforting aroma of her father's cooking offered only temporary respite. She was no longer the innocent girl who had left for university. Life had shaped her into a woman familiar with heartbreak, success, and betrayal. Despite her emotional turmoil, Isabella was not one to wallow indefinitely. She found a small co-working space in nearby Florence. Determined to start fresh, tapping into her international business experience, she began consulting for boutique hospitality brands, family-run villas, eco-friendly farm stays, agriturismos that needed a professional edge to compete. Word of her expertise spread quickly, and soon she had more clients than she could handle on her own. With her father's encouragement, she started her own venture, Romano Consulting. The name honored her family heritage, and she poured herself into each project, ensuring small operators thrived amidst competition from giants like Harrington Resorts. Her heartbreak fueled her, giving her an edge, a passion to prove she wasn't just a discarded pawn of a wealthy empire. As her clients flourished, so did her reputation. Back in London, Richard Harrington was trapped in a gilded cage of his own making. The business soared, yes, but the personal toll mounted. The gossip columns wouldn't let him forget the door slam at Roseworth Manor. Even staff members whispered about the day Isabella showed up. Clarissa, of course, brushed it aside as a necessary step. We must maintain Harrington prestige. She was causing quite a scene, she sniffed. Stella, on the other hand, leveraged the public drama to further her position. She calmed investors, curated PR campaigns, and became Richard's right-hand executive. But cracks began to appear in the seemingly unstoppable Harrington empire. An influential Middle Eastern partner, Sheikh Omar Al-Fahim, grew skeptical of Stella's aggressive tactics and withdrew from a major Dubai deal. The press started questioning the authenticity of Harrington's sustainable image after an investigative journalist uncovered damaging information about resource mismanagement in their Seychelles resort. Without Isabella's conscientious oversight, corners were cut to maximize profit. And inside the boardroom, tension escalated as old guard executives found Stella's style abrasive. Yet Richard seemed too distracted to intervene. Meanwhile, Richard was haunted by guilt. He replayed the moment he slammed the door on Isabella, hearing its echo in his mind late at night. The memory of her tearful eyes broke him in ways he wouldn't admit to anyone. Yet he couldn't reconcile the swirling confusion inside him. Anger, regret, and the weight of a mother who insisted he move on from a failed marriage. Fate is sometimes mercifully cruel. A year after the Roseworth Manor incident, Isabella was invited to speak at a hospitality conference in Rome. Her consulting firm's success had caught the attention of European travel boards. Despite her reservations, she accepted the keynote invitation. She had come a long way since Heartbreak. Standing on stage before hoteliers and industry leaders, she spoke passionately about the power of sustainable luxury rooted in genuine community engagement. When she finished, the applause roared through the auditorium, validating all her struggles. Among the crowd sat Michael Anderson, the real estate tycoon who had once attended her wedding. After the speech, he approached her. "That was phenomenal, Isabella," he said, extending his hand. "I'm impressed by how far you've come. I have a few projects that might interest you." The two arranged a meeting for the following day to discuss potential collaborations in Spain and South America. But another, far more painful presence lingered at the conference. Richard Harrington, though not scheduled to speak, was there with Stella to meet potential investors. The sight of Isabella on stage, radiant and commanding, left him frozen. She was no longer the tearful woman at his doorstep. She had transformed into a confident leader, respected by the industry. Richard felt a jolt of admiration and longing, overshadowed by shame. During a coffee break, they inevitably crossed paths. Isabella instinctively turned to avoid him, but he reached out. "Isabella." His voice faltered. She paused, steeling herself. Turning around, she met his eyes, arms folded protectively. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of unspoken apologies hanging in the air. Finally, Richard mustered a greeting. "Your keynote was impressive," he said softly. Isabella thanked him politely, her eyes guarded. Stella soon materialized at his side, placing a territorial hand on his arm. Isabella nodded tersely and walked away, leaving Richard to wrestle with the emptiness she left behind. While Isabella rose in esteem, Harrington Resorts began to buckle under Stella Carter's leadership. Internal reports revealed overextension in multiple markets. Resources were stretched too thin. Environmental groups threatened legal action over broken sustainability promises. To quell the uproar, large sums of money were funneled into hasty repairs and hush settlements. Board members muttered that Richard Harrington had lost his edge. The once stable empire started to crack, and Stella's iron-fisted approach stifled creativity and morale. Sensing the board's discontent, Stella manipulated Richard further, insisting that more expansions were the only way to keep the brand's image fresh. In truth, these expansions masked the cash flow problems. Investors grew nervous, and Clarissa herself scolded Stella privately, though she feared publicly undermining the woman who now controlled her son's ear. The tension reached a boiling point when Harrington Resorts faced a lawsuit over environmental violations in Phuket, a direct contradiction to the brand's eco-friendly claims. The media had a field day, dubbing the scandal greenwashing at Harrington Resorts. Stocks plummeted, wiping out millions overnight. Richard's anxiety soared, fueled by insomnia and a nagging guilt about driving away the one person who could have prevented this fiasco. He was beginning to realize that in slamming the door on Isabella, he had lost not just his wife, but also a moral compass and a business partner who genuinely cared about sustainable practices. Late one night, Richard found himself alone in his penthouse, swirling a tumbler of whiskey. The city lights spread out below like a neon ocean, mocking his emptiness. He rummaged through old photos stored on his laptop, pictures of him and Isabella, beaming at their wedding, walking the vineyards in Tuscany, standing in front of the Bali eco-resort construction site. Each image cut deeper, reminding him of the vows he'd broken and the legacy he'd tainted. Over the next few days, Richard took tentative steps to rectify his mistakes. He began attending environmental conferences, meeting with sustainability experts to understand where Harrington Resorts had gone wrong. He distanced himself from Stella, ignoring her calls for aggressive expansions. Board members noticed the shift, and Clarissa fumed that her son was becoming too sentimental. But Richard pressed on, driven by an internal realization that without a moral center, no empire could stand indefinitely. When the environmental lawsuit threatened to shut down Phuket operations, Richard reached out to a consulting group, Waverly & Jones, a firm recommended by an old friend, ironically one that had once mocked Harrington's greenwashing. In the midst of negotiations, he learned a surprising detail. The lead negotiator at Waverly & Jones was one of Isabella's close associates. This consultant mentioned that Isabella had helped shape a fair trade agreement for a group of small hoteliers in Southeast Asia, a benchmark for genuine sustainable tourism. The news hit him like a thunderbolt. Isabella was still quietly working in the exact sphere that Harrington claimed to champion. Stella Carter, threatened by Richard's shift in direction, struck before he could fully unseat her. Behind the scenes, she formed an alliance with a rival hotel group, planning to leak confidential Harrington documents that would further damage the company's reputation. Her aim was twofold: sabotage Richard for hesitating to expand and secure her own position by jumping ship to a competitor. It was a cunning move that blindsided the Harrington board when the leaked documents surfaced in the press, showing questionable financial maneuvers and environmental disregard. Harrington Resorts suffered a massive blow to its credibility. Major investors pulled out. Stocks tanked further. In the chaos, the board demanded decisive action. They convened an emergency meeting in London. Stella, smelling blood, insisted on Richard's resignation. Clarissa begged her son to fight, but he was exhausted. Remorse weighed him down, and the relentless scandal seemed impossible to fix alone. The board was split. Some blamed Stella, some blamed Richard, and some even invoked the memory of Isabella, lamenting the days when Harrington truly cared about sustainable innovation. In a bold move, Richard took control of the meeting. He exposed Stella's alliance with a rival hotel group, presenting email evidence of her duplicity. A hush fell over the boardroom. Realizing the jig was up, Stella tried to accuse Richard of forging the evidence, but even Clarissa stepped in to confirm suspicious behavior she had observed. Security escorted Stella from the building. The immediate danger was removed, but the damage to Harrington Resorts was staggering. The empire was on the brink of collapse, and Richard stood in the center of the wreckage, uncertain how to salvage what remained. Word of the Harrington collapse reached Isabella through international business headlines. She felt a pang of sorrow, not triumph. Despite everything, she had once poured her soul into that company. Memories of brainstorming sessions with Richard in their small London apartment flickered in her mind. She saw images of the newly opened Bali resort. Remembered the faces of the local staff they had empowered with fair wages and skills training. But the empire she once helped build was being dismantled by greed and poor decisions. While she had no intention of returning to the Harrington fold, her compassion won out. Through a mutual connection, Matthew Ford, a well-regarded hospitality consultant, she reached out to Richard indirectly. Matthew was astonished when Isabella said, "If Richard truly wants to save what's left, and if he has genuine intentions, I'm willing to provide guidance. But this is strictly professional." When the message reached Richard, he felt a mixture of relief and shame. Could he really face her after everything he'd done? After slamming that door in her face? And yet, this might be the only lifeline to resurrect Harrington Resorts. With trembling resolve, he sent her an email, a formal invitation to meet at the Harrington London office to discuss a potential partnership. Isabella hesitated before responding. She knew this could be a trap for more heartbreak. But her sense of duty, both to the cause of sustainable hospitality and to the memories she cherished, guided her decision. She agreed to meet, but only under strict professional terms. No personal entanglements, no manipulations, just a chance to do some good. The day of the meeting felt surreal. Isabella stepped into the Harrington headquarters for the first time since her separation. The receptionist, who once greeted her daily with a bright, "Good morning, Mrs. Harrington," now gave a polite, uncertain nod. She walked down corridors lined with framed articles praising Richard's success from years past. Articles she had once proudly edited. In the conference room, she found Richard waiting alone. He looked older, more tired, the weight of his actions etched into the lines around his eyes. She approached, chin raised. "Richard," she said, her voice cool. He stood up, cleared his throat, and motioned for her to sit. Silence enveloped them like a thick fog. "Thank you for coming," he managed. I know I have no right to ask for your help after everything. His voice trailed off. Isabella laid a binder on the table. Let's keep this professional. You want to salvage the company's sustainability reputation? I have a plan. For the next hour, they discussed strategy. Isabella presented a comprehensive roadmap, cutting down expansions, refocusing on genuinely eco-friendly policies, re-engaging local communities, and forging transparent partnerships. Richard listened intently, occasionally offering input. She was the same woman he once worked with late into the night, mapping out eco-resorts that would revolutionize the industry. The difference was that now her eyes held a guarded distance, a barrier he recognized as the scar of his betrayal. The board, skeptical of Isabella's return, grilled her in a subsequent meeting. Some believed she was there to humiliate the Harrington name. Others worried about the cost of the radical overhaul she proposed. But Isabella's clear-eyed explanations and unwavering confidence began to sway them. She demonstrated that the current path, steeped in scandal and environmental neglect, was far more expensive in the long run. She brought up concrete examples, referencing her successful work with boutique hotels in Asia and Europe. Slowly, opinion shifted. Clarissa Harrington was conspicuously absent from these sessions. Rumor had it she was sulking at Roseworth Manor, too ashamed to face the mess that had unraveled under her watch. As for Richard, he gave Isabella the reins to craft a new sustainability division. The plan was to rebrand Harrington Resorts from the ground up, publicly acknowledge the mistakes, and pledge accountability. They would back up their pledge with verifiable audits from external agencies, something never done before at Harrington. Working together again brought a strange mix of nostalgia and pain. Late nights at the office, reviewing spreadsheets, conferring with lawyers, and drafting press releases felt like stepping back into a rhythm they once shared. But gone were the soft touches and playful banter. Instead, they communicated through spreadsheets and bullet points. Richard sensed her distance, respecting the boundaries she set. Yet every time she said his name, a flicker of hope ignited in him hope for forgiveness, or at least understanding. In the midst of restructuring, a new scandal threatened to erupt. A tabloid found out about the behind-closed-doors collaboration between Richard and Isabella. They published a headline dripping with drama. Harrington's ex-wife to the rescue? Or a vengeful plot? Reporters swarmed the Harrington building, shouting questions about the status of their marriage and the sincerity of their reconciliation. Isabella, who had carefully avoided personal discussions, found herself cornered by cameras one evening. She refused to feed the gossip, stating only, "My work here is to help restore a sustainable vision for Harrington Resorts." That's all. The unspoken words lingered. The rest is nobody's business. Behind the scenes, Clarissa made an unexpected move. She reached out to Isabella, requesting a private meeting at Roseworth Manor. Torn between anger and curiosity, Isabella agreed, if only to ensure no interference would jeopardize the company's fragile turnaround. The mansion was just as imposing as she remembered. Walking up to its ornate door reminded her of the night she begged for entry and received only heartbreak. Clarissa greeted her in a drawing room filled with antiques and family portraits. She appeared subdued, shadows of guilt etched across her refined features. "Isabella," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I've made many mistakes. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I need you to know everything I did, I thought was to protect Richard and the Harrington name." Isabella listened quietly. She recalled Clarissa's relentless criticisms, the microaggressions, the day she overheard that Isabella might not be Harrington material. The older woman continued. "Stella came at a vulnerable time. I thought she could help Richard keep the company on top. I turned a blind eye to her methods. I was wrong." A moment passed in thick silence. Isabella sighed. "What you did caused immense pain. I can't rewrite the past, but I'm here for the company's sake and for the values it can still uphold." Clarissa nodded, tears glistening. "I understand. That's more than I deserve." As the rebrand progressed, Harrington Resorts signed new agreements with international conservation groups, launched an internal ethics committee, and sponsored community-driven projects in areas where they operated. Isabella's blueprint began to bear fruit. Travel journalists started penning cautious praise for Harrington's attempt at redemption. Investor confidence stabilized. Stocks, while far from their peak, stopped plummeting. Step by step, they clawed back from the brink of disaster. Richard found himself in awe of Isabella's relentless dedication, her ability to win over skeptics, and her unstoppable spirit. The nights they spent in conference rooms gradually warmed, not into the romantic haze they once shared, but into a mutual respect. Each small success fueled his resolve to set things right. He penned a handwritten letter, an apology he'd rehearsed in his head 1,000 times. One evening, as she prepared to leave the office, he handed her an envelope. Isabella hesitated, seeing his scrolled signature. "Richard, I don't think. Please read it." "When you have a moment," he said softly. She tucked it into her bag, uncertainty clouding her features. Back in her rented London flat, she refused to stay in any Harrington property. Isabella poured herself a glass of wine. She stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. Finally, she tore it open. Inside was a multi-page letter, Richard's handwriting shaking in places. "Isabella, I don't know how to begin apologizing for what I did. Slamming the door on you was the worst mistake of my life. Not because of the business fallout, but because I broke the vows we made under a Tuscan sun. The shame I feel is indescribable. I should have fought for you, for us. Instead, I let pride, fear, and outside pressures poison my judgment. Seeing you now, leading with such grace and conviction, reminds me of the woman I fell in love with, who captured my heart at that university networking event. Every day, I'm haunted by my actions. Yet, I'm also grateful for the second chance you've given Harrington Resorts. I don't deserve it. I can only hope that one day I'll earn your trust again. If not as a husband, then at least as someone who will spend the rest of his life making amends. I will respect any boundaries you set, but I want you to know I still love you. Forgive me if that's too selfish to admit." Richard. Tears blurred her vision. She recalled the boyish grin he wore when he first offered her a homemade sandwich in Hyde Park, how safe she felt in his arms dancing by the Thames. But her heartbreak was still raw. She spent the rest of the night wide awake, torn between memories of what they once had and the irrevocable pain he had caused. As weeks turned into months, Harrington Resorts slowly regained its footing thanks to Isabella's strategy. Magazines ran stories about the brand's remarkable about-face. Investors, initially cautious, began trickling back. Isabella and Richard worked side by side, forging a reluctant camaraderie. They still avoided personal topics in front of others, maintaining professional decorum. Yet, after hours, they'd have moments of quiet reflection, discussing ethical business practices and how to safeguard them against future corruption. One evening, after finalizing a significant contract with the World Wildlife Federation, they stepped onto the balcony overlooking the Thames. Lights twinkled along the river's edge. A nostalgic hush fell between them. "I never thought we'd be here again," Richard murmured, hands resting on the railing. "Neither did I," Isabella replied, sipping her tea. She glanced at him. The yearning in his eyes was unmistakable, but so was her caution. He tentatively reached for her hand, stopping short. She didn't move away. "Isabella," he whispered, voice trembling, "I know I can't undo the past, but would you let me try to build a future where we can at least be friends? Maybe more." Her heart pounded. The rational part of her mind warned of betrayal, of the door slam in Surrey. But another part remembered the vow she made when she first fell in love, to never let fear overshadow the possibility of happiness. She slid her hand into his, giving it a gentle squeeze. One step at a time, Richard, to finalize a new initiative connecting Harrington Resorts with local European vineyards. Isabella proposed visiting Lucca to scout potential partnerships. It had been over 2 years since she had set foot in her childhood home. Richard volunteered to accompany her, under the guise of business necessity. Hesitantly, she agreed. Part of her wanted him to see where she came from again, perhaps to remind them both of who they used to be. They arrived in Lucca by train, the rolling Tuscan hills as breathtaking as ever. Isabella's parents, Francesco and Caterina, welcomed them. It was an awkward reunion, overshadowed by the heartbreak that had once devastated their daughter. But as the days passed, Richard's earnest remorse shone through. He helped Francesco in the trattoria kitchen, learned traditional recipes, and listened intently as Caterina recounted Isabella's difficult homecoming after the door slam. While forging connections with local vineyard owners, Isabella witnessed a gentler, more introspective Richard. He wasn't the cocky magnate who used to stride through boardrooms. He joked with farmers about grape harvests, expressed genuine interest in sustainable farming methods, and even got his hands dirty in the vineyard. In a quiet moment under the Tuscan sun, picking a ripe fig, Isabella realized her resentment was melting, replaced by a cautious sense of rekindled affection. Each day, Luca brought Isabella and Richard closer. Yet an unspoken question loomed. Could she ever fully forgive him? They ventured to the vineyard where they'd once danced after a friend's wedding many years ago. The memory of that night, brimming with young love and possibility, made her chest ache. As the sun set behind cypress trees, Richard admitted he'd been dreaming of this moment, just to be near her, without the weight of scandal or resentment crushing them. "I'm not the man I was," he said quietly, "and I promise never to be him again." She wanted to believe him, seeing how his eyes shone with sincerity. That night, they shared dinner with her parents, the conversation laced with laughter and cautious hope. Caterina pulled Isabella aside, whispering, "Do what makes your heart proud, cara mia. If that means giving him a chance, do it with your whole heart." On their final night, in Lucca, a phone call from Clarissa Harrington surprised Isabella. The older woman asked if they could speak privately. Isabella agreed, half dreading another confrontation. Clarissa's voice, however, trembled with vulnerability. She apologized for her role in the breakdown of their marriage, admitting she had been blinded by her obsession with preserving the Harrington legacy. "Richard told me about your time there," Clarissa said softly. "He's never sounded so peaceful. I see now how much you brought to his life and to our family business. Thank you for giving Harrington Resorts a second chance, even if you never give me one." Isabella felt a complex swirl of emotions: anger, pity, empathy. There were no instant cures for wounds inflicted by Clarissa's past behavior. Yet, the apology felt genuine. "I appreciate your words," Isabella responded carefully. "Perhaps we can let our actions speak going forward." Returning to London, they officially launched Harrington's rebranded eco-luxury program. Reporters who once clamored for gossip now ran features highlighting genuine community partnerships, improved working conditions, and transparent supply chains. Public trust started to mend. Even the board members who once doubted Isabella recognized her as the key to their salvation. During a celebratory press conference, Richard publicly acknowledged her contributions. None of this would be possible without Isabella Romano, whose vision and commitment guided us back to our core values. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Richard turned to Isabella with gratitude shining in his eyes. She offered a gracious smile, the first truly peaceful one she'd shown him in years, feeling a sense of calm standing by his side. After the conference, they found themselves alone in his office. Isabella fidgeted with her notes, uncertain what to say. Richard hesitated, then spoke. If you'd like, we could have dinner tonight. Just us. No business talk, no cameras." He paused, searching her expression. "I want to make new memories with you." She took a breath, her heart fluttering. "All right, one dinner." They chose a quiet Italian restaurant near the Thames, reminiscent of the small, family-owned places Isabella adored. Over candlelight, they spoke about everything except the company: childhood anecdotes, travel stories, and personal revelations. Richard listened intently to her experiences in Florence and Rome, how she built Romano Consulting from scratch, the obstacles she overcame. Isabella, in turn, heard about his struggles, the crippling self-doubt, the pain of realizing he'd lost the woman he loved, and the slow awakening to his own accountability. A soft violin played in the background, and as dessert arrived, Richard reached for her hand. "I'm sorry," he repeated, his voice low with emotion. "Not just for slamming that door, but for every time I let you feel unworthy." Isabella's eyes glistened. We can't change the past, Richard. But if we move forward, we do it with honesty. And I won't settle for anything less. He nodded, tears threatening to spill. The moment felt like a fragile crystal. One wrong word could shatter it. Yet by the time they left the restaurant, hand in hand, an unspoken possibility of renewed love glowed between them. With reconciliation on the horizon, new challenges emerged. The media speculated wildly about a rekindled romance, fueling paparazzi outside their homes. Shareholders, unsettled by the personal drama, questioned whether a potential remarriage would disrupt business. Even Clarissa's stance wavered. She wanted them back together for the right optics, but also worried Isabella would overshadow her influence. Richard and Isabella navigated these hurdles cautiously. They attended couples therapy under the radar, determined not to repeat old mistakes. They built trust slowly, step by step. Arguments still flared over residual suspicions, over the painful memory of Stella's role, over Clarissa's continued, albeit softer, meddling, but each time, they resolved to communicate openly, refusing to let resentment fester. In a poignant gesture, Isabella took him to the spot by the Thames where they had once danced. They stood at the edge of the water, recalling a simpler time. He held her close, gently rocking to the ambient hum of city life. Tears stained both their cheeks, a release of pent-up sorrow and renewed hope. "I don't want to hurt you ever again," Richard whispered. Months passed, and together they steered Harrington Resorts into a new era of success, an empire built not merely on luxurious facades, but on tangible community uplift and environmental stewardship. Isabella's name appeared alongside Richard's in major travel publications, praising them for resurrecting a fallen giant with integrity. Romano Consulting merged in part with Harrington's sustainability division, creating a joint venture that placed Isabella in a powerful yet respected leadership position. On a balmy evening in the living room of Isabella's London flat, Richard got down on one knee. "I gave away our future once," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Now, I ask if you'll let me build a new one with you. Marry me again." Tears filled Isabella's eyes. She recalled the day he slammed the door in her face at Roseworth Manor. But now, he was on his knees, vulnerable, remorseful, and ready to change. She smiled through her tears, nodding. "Yes, Richard, let's try again. But this time, we do it as equals." Their second wedding was a quiet affair held in a sunlit garden outside London. No massive guest list. No paparazzi, just close friends and family, including Francesco and Caterina from Lucca, and even Clarissa, who maintained a respectful, genuinely warm demeanor. Vines twined around a wooden arch, soft music played, and a light breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. As they exchanged vows again, both Isabella and Richard felt the weight of all they had endured. Promises broken, hearts shattered, and an empire nearly lost. Yet here they were, forging a union stronger than the first, built on hard-earned lessons. When they kissed to seal their vows, the guests erupted in applause. It wasn't just the applause of a society spectacle. It was a joyful outpouring of support for two souls who had found the courage to try again. The years that followed were a testament to their renewed commitment, not just to their business, but to each other. Harrington Resorts, under their joint stewardship, didn't just flourish. It became a beacon of ethical luxury, a global leader admired for its genuine connection to local communities and unwavering dedication to environmental stewardship. Isabella and Richard, side by side, championed countless initiatives, their work celebrated in publications worldwide, not as a mere corporate turnaround, but as a profound story of redemption and resilience. Their London home, once a place of silent tension, now echoed with laughter, often joined by the delighted squeals of their twin children, a boy with Richard's thoughtful eyes and a girl with Isabella's fiery spirit. Evenings were often spent not in separate offices, but together, perhaps by the Thames, reminiscing not about the pain, but about the strength they found in rebuilding. Francesco and Caterina became frequent visitors, their joy in their daughter's happiness palpable. Clarissa, too, found a new, gentler role as a doting grandmother, the sharp edges of her ambition softened by the warmth of family. The once imposing Roseworth Manor became a place of happy family gatherings, its doors now always open. Gone were the days of slammed doors and whispered betrayals. In their place stood a partnership fortified by honesty, a love deepened by shared trials, and an empire rebuilt on the solid foundation of integrity and compassion. Isabella and Richard's story, with its final threads of heartbreak, now intricately woven into a beautiful tapestry of redemption, stood as a powerful testament. Sometimes, losing what you thought was everything is precisely what leads you to find what truly, deeply matters. Love and betrayal, fortune and loss. Isabella and Richard's story proves that even the greatest empires can crumble with one wrong turn. And yet, miracles happen when two people dare to rebuild. They face trials that threaten their marriage, their business, and their very identities. And still, they emerge stronger, finding that real wealth isn't measured in money or fame, but in trust, respect, and courage. If their journey captivated your heart, don't let the story end here. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more tales of love, redemption, and the raw power of the human spirit. Who knows? Maybe the next story you hear will inspire you to take your own leap of faith. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for our next dramatic chapter in life's unpredictable saga.